Okay, so in the previous video you learned what vertex form was and how to read it to be able to tell what the vertex is, and then how to be able to create the equation if you're given the vertex. What we're going to do in this lesson is actually be able to create that equation from other equations. So we're going to be talking about vertex form of a quadratic again. Please make sure you're taking all notes. And let's start by remembering that vertex form is y equals x minus h squared plus k, where h comma k is the vertex. So what needs to be remembered here or recognized is that this format right here should look relatively familiar. And so the question becomes, if you don't have an equation in that format, if you don't have a quadratic in that format, how can you create it? I don't know if anyone has thought about this yet, but this actually looks awfully similar to completing the square. And so actually, in order to create vertex form, that's exactly what we're going to do. We complete the square. And that, besides solving, would be one of the key reasons that we learn how to do this. So, if we are given something like y equals x squared minus 2x minus 8, our objective is to know what the vertex is. Now, of course, there are lots of different ways that we can accomplish this. Right now, one easy thing that you might be able to do is just go in your calculator and go to y equals and go x squared minus 2x minus 8, and go ahead and graph that thing. See that it does look like your parabola. Maybe check out the table, and we can see that our vertex is 1, negative 9. But right now we don't see that in this equation. So remember that Ms. Summers talked about what are your advantages and disadvantages of your different formats. Right now I can see that the y-intercept is negative 8. Right now I can see, since the a value is positive 1, I can see that this thing opens up. It has its advantages right now, but getting it in vertex form also has its advantages. So what I'm going to do is complete the square. So to do that, I'm going to start by adding 8 to both sides. So that gives me y plus 8 equals x squared minus 2x. And now that I've done that, I go over to the side. The b value in this case is negative 2. Half of that value is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides of this equation. And that gives me y plus 9 equals x squared minus 2x plus 1. And now, this is a perfect square trinomial, which means it can be written as x minus 1 squared. This was y plus 9. Notice this is very, very close to looking like that. The only thing I would have to do is bring that 9 back over. So if I subtracted 9 from both sides, I would get y equals x minus 1 squared minus 9. That is now in vertex form, and now I can identify the vertex the same way that you did in the first video. The inside number is the opposite, so that would be +1. The outside number is exactly the same, so that would be -9. And that matches exactly what we were shown in the table. That is how we would create vertex form given that parabola. Okay? That's basically what it is. That's one of the primary reasons that we learned how to complete the square. So then it just becomes doing different examples of that. One of the things that a lot of people struggled with when we first did this was when there were odd numbers for b. But again, that doesn't change the way any of this works. So let's do an example of that. If we have y equals x squared plus 5x minus 24. I want to put that in vertex form. Now again, if I chose to, I could go here, and let's just preemptively know what our vertex would be. So if I do x squared plus 5x minus 24, there's the graph. I don't see the whole thing, and that's okay. But if I go to my table, so this one, notice that I have -30 and -30 for the y values, which means the vertex is somewhere in between there. This one's going to have a decimal for my vertex. So this is actually a very good reason that I might want to have this thing in vertex form. Okay, because the calculator doesn't nicely give me the vertex for this one. So let's complete the square and get it that way. Start by adding 24 to both sides. So that gives me y plus 24 equals x squared plus 5x. Okay, pause the video, see if you can complete the square on this. B is 5, half of b is 2.5, 2.5 squared is 6.25. So I'm going to add 6.25 to both sides. And that should give us y equals 30.25, y plus 30.25 equals x squared plus 5x plus 6.25. And now this should factor nicely into x plus 2.5 squared. This is y plus 30.25. And the only thing left to do, subtract 30.25 from both sides. And that gives you y equals x plus 2.5 squared minus 30.25. Now that this is in vertex form, you can actually figure out what the vertex is quite easily. The vertex here is simply the opposite of what's next to x, so that would be -2.5, and the same as what's on the outside is -30.25. And if you are using your calculator, I don't know if anyone has shown you this before, but actually what you can do is, if you're looking at a graph of that, if you see the entire graph, so what I'm going to do is I go to zoom, and then I'm going to zoom out, which I go there and press enter so that I can see the entire graph. As long as I see the entire graph, now if I press second trace, there's a button right there that says minimum. And now notice that it says left bound, so I'm going to arrow there over to the left of the minimum and press enter. Now it asks for the right bound, so I arrow to the right of the minimum, and then it asks for guess, so I put it somewhere in the middle. And now on the bottom here it says, for some reason it's not exact, but it does say that it's about negative 2.5, negative 30.25, which tells me that we are accurate there. There is our minimum. Okay? That's how we convert from a standard form quadratic into vertex form. The only other thing to keep in mind, if you have an a value that's not equal to 1, do not forget that your first step has to be to get a equal to 1. But generally speaking, you're just completing the square. Give that a try. Make sure to always verify your work using your calculator. If you have any questions, visit the office hours of your teacher, email, or message us through Schoology. Have fun!